Today on Lightning Bugs.
I started that circle and set it up holding a ball of wool and said, okay, I'm going to throw this around and catch it and hold on to it. And so we threw the ball of wool all around the circle. And at the end, when there was this web in front of us, everyone sort of let go. And I said, what does that mean? What does it symbolize? And all of the kids said, we're connected, but we felt this real disconnect. So my colleague said, wouldn't it be cool if we could throw the ball of wool around town? And, oh, that's a crazy idea. But I like crazy ideas. So I went away that night and contacted everyone I could in Broken Hill, and we bought all of the emergency tape that we could find because I figured that we might be able to see that from a drone in the sky, and we filmed it. We asked the kids to hold on.
Just add the tape to it.
Exactly. Then that we realized that it was pretty special. So when we actually looked at the footage from the air, that's kind of when we thought that this might be a message that we'd like to share with broader communities. We also thought it would be something that people everywhere would be able to relate to. And that's when we decided to put the song to it. And I think that definitely the way that people have shared the video, the way that people have reached out to us, the support that we've received, but also the conversations it started for people in situations like us.
Hi, if you're enjoying listening to Lightning Bugs, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot. Hello, scrollers. Welcome to Thursday. Today we've got Sarah Donnelley, who is an incredible award-winning teacher and musician based in Australia. She recently received an ARIA award, which is it's the Australian version of a Grammy. Or maybe Grammy is the American version of ARIA. I'm not sure which. But she received an ARIA award for a video project she made with her students during COVID-19 lockdown in Wilcannia, Australia. That's in the middle of nowhere. Sarah promotes creativity inside and outside of her classroom, connecting the community around her and inspiring generations to create music anywhere and any way they can. She's a badass. 1, 2. Hey, how's it going? Good to meet you, Sarah.
Nice to meet you too.
Thanks for coming on my little podcast. We're early in this, so I'm still at the excited to do it phase of it. So You're in that.
That's always good.
Congratulations on your ARIA. Did you ever think anyone would be congratulating you on your ARIA?
Still kind of all sinking in. I think one of the kids, when they ran, after they announced it, a few of the kids ran through community and came straight to the house where we were all watching the announcement. And one of the girls said, see, when we're a teacher like Miss, we can win an ARIA too. So I thought that was pretty amazing.
That's awesome. For anyone who doesn't know what an ARIA is, because I didn't before I presented one back in 1995. What were you doing in 1995?
I was actually just starting primary school in 1995.
In 1995, back when you were starting primary school, I was embarking on the career that a musician would embark on back in those days, which is a very selfish one of trying to get rich and famous. But you were on a completely different trajectory, and there you've won an ARIA, and I have not. So you got there quicker by actually just being, by just being yourself. What did you think you would do when you grew up, when you were that age?
Well, it's funny. I actually only last week was going through some old things in storage and cleaning out some stuff because I'm back visiting my parents for the Christmas break. And I actually found a card about this big that I'd written when I was just starting high school. And on it, I said, when I grow up, I want to be a singer and a teacher. And I have to admit that as I went through high school, I was thinking more along the lines of lawyer and that sort of thing. But reflecting on my life, I can't believe I ever thought I was going to do anything other than be a teacher.
Wow. So it came back to it. I think a lot of kids are like that. Like you kind of know more about your direction in some ways before you start applying, your teenage overthinking brain to it. And the whole time that's what you were going to do.
At 8 years old, I ran Christmas concerts for my family. I lined up my brothers and sisters and cousins, and I wrote Christmas plays and nativity scenes and Christmas carols and medleys of all these songs. And my poor family had to sit through hour-long performances on a hot summer Australian Christmas day while the kids dressed up as angels and sang Jingle Bells.
I think that too. I always think my poor parents, all the music they had to hear and all the crap that I made everyone do, like lining people up. And I also used to like to make plays. Like I would write little skits and I would have the parts written down. And I'd walk around with a tape recorder asking everyone to say one of the lines. Where did you grow up?
So I'm from Sydney.
Okay.
Was very lucky to grow up around Bondi, Bronte sort of area. And had my family was from various parts of sort of New South Wales. And so we got to get out of the city quite often. But yeah, I'm a city girl at heart. Grew up by the ocean.
How do you get from Bondi and Bronte out to Wilcannia?
Wilcannia, yeah.
Okay, Wilcannia.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a sea change. For listeners who don't know where Wilcannia is, it's in far west New South Wales. So it's almost as far as you can go in New South Wales.
Before you get where?
Before you get over the border. So to the edge of, so sort of heading towards Central Australia in that direction.
Okay.
So we're a remote town. Wilcannia's 2 hours from Broken Hill, which is where the nearest supermarket is. And the traditional owners of the land are Barkindji mob. So it's a really special place for Aboriginal people and also non-Aboriginal people because there's a long history of a trade route through that area and station owners. So it's a very special place, but I guess how did I end up there? It's a bit of a sea change, 12-hour drive from home. As a teacher, I'd worked with Aboriginal families here in Sydney, so in the areas of La Perouse and Redfern. And I often had students that would go away back to visit their families for sorry business and different things. And they would talk about their strong connection to country. And I wanted to go out and feel that and learn from community on country and see what that experience was like, and that's what led me out there.
I mean, you just heard about the job and or applied for it or saw it in the paper. How'd you end up out there?
So I work for New South Wales Department of Education, and I was lucky enough to have a permanent position at a school in Sydney on the coast. And my principal at the time was really supportive and knew that this was an avenue I wanted to explore and something I was really interested in, and supported me to basically take leave from my position for a temporary contract in Wilcannia. So I signed up for 6 months, and within 2 weeks said, I think you're going to have me for a little longer than 6 months, if that's okay.
That's really striking about your the video of I guess it's a Paul Kelly song. Well, I think two things. One is what I see as, I suppose you meant it as a metaphor for connection with the tape, because the internet is even worse out there than it is where I am now.
I think it was the start of all of the ARIA sort of whirlwind. So when COVID happened and we were starting to talk with families about what that meant for them and what that meant for our school, what it meant for our community, being an Aboriginal community, we were particularly heightened and aware of what could happen if anyone became sick out there. So we were on high alert.
Yeah.
We were working really closely with our health organisations, New South Wales Health and Marima. One of the things we wanted to make sure was that our families got the right information. So in the first instance, they were saying that schools were closed apart from students who were vulnerable or whose parents were health workers. So a lot of our students really needed to keep coming to school, and so we had to manage that. But a lot of the families made the choice as they were able to keep them at home because they were worried about what was going on. So we also had staff, obviously, and like schools everywhere, we were starting to really think about what we could do. We had to think creatively to ensure that we had continuity of learning through that time.
Right.
And one of the first things I did was go out and survey families, and about 3 out of 15 families that were surveyed had access to internet at home. So while colleagues were starting to do online learning and Zoom classrooms and continuing reading to the kids through that, it just wasn't a viable solution for us. So we had to think outside the box a bit. And so we started delivering home learning packs and the resources to the families and to support them. we started visiting our local radio station every day, and a teacher would go up once a day and explain the activities, because radio was something that people had access to. So teachers would talk about the activities that we had delivered to support the families, to support the students. The added layer of that was sitting in Zoom meetings. And as teachers, our number one business is relationships. And so we felt such a strong loss with not having our kids in front of us every day. And so when we're talking to our colleagues, and I was facilitating a meeting, and one of them was talking about really feeling that loss of connection. And she mentioned that earlier in the year, at the very beginning of the year, so we start every day with a yarning circle. We sit around with our kids and we talk about how we're feeling, what's going on, what's happening that day. And so at the beginning of last year, I started that circle and set it up holding a ball of wool and said, okay, I'm going to throw this around and catch it and hold on to it. And so we threw the ball of wool all around the circle. And at the end, when there was this web in front of us, everyone sort of let go. And I said, what does that mean? What does it symbolize? And all of the kids said, we're connected, we're mob, we're family. So all of a sudden, we're finding ourselves in a time when, even though we're only 30 seconds down the road, we're in a very small town, there's only 600 to 700 people in our town. We know exactly where everyone is, but we felt this real disconnect. So my colleague said, wouldn't it be cool if we could throw the ball of wool around town? And, oh, that's a crazy idea. But I like crazy ideas. So I went away that night and contacted everyone I could in Broken Hill, and we bought all of the emergency tape that we could find, because I figured that we might be able to see that from a drone in the sky. And the next day we just went out, we did our everyday delivery. That was just a normal day in the life of us as teaching staff. And we filmed it. We asked the kids to hold on.
Just add the tape to it.
Exactly. Then that we realized that it was pretty special. So when we actually looked at the footage from the air, that's kind of when we thought that this might be a message that we'd like to share with broader communities. We also thought it would be something that people everywhere would be able to relate to. And that's when we decided to put the song to it. And I think that definitely the way that people have shared the video, the way that people have reached out to us, the support that we've received, but also the conversations it started for people in situations like us, and kids in cities that don't have access in the same way that we might not.
You made a video that, because you can see the physical connection through the tape, it actually kind of makes the viewer envious of your community. I mean, what you see there is like something that's enviable, that I thought, man, I want to grow up in a place like that. That's what it felt like, which I thought was pretty brilliant. Like, especially in an era where I think, it's easier sometimes to play the fiddle a little more with all our situations, rather than be, as I think, stoic and uplifting as that was. And it really is brilliant. Where did you get the tape? So you answered that too. You just found like every Bunnings and Broken Hill.
Yeah, every hardware store, any emergency tape that you have, put them in a box. And one of my amazing colleagues went around and diligently picked them all up. And I think that's what I'm really happy that that's what you got out of the video, because for me, the whole video was about celebrating the creativity of my staff, celebrating the innovation of our community, the way the radio and the health organizations and everyone came together. But the most amazing thing is it does celebrate the beauty of being in a small town like that, of knowing where everyone is being able to look after each other, being able to come together. In our community, there were the most amazing initiatives. Like, we were just one organization who was working through that time, but there was community members that started a Meals on Wheels program, and we helped support that by making one dessert each week that went out to the elders in our community. There were all of these organizations coming together to work together. We ran a holiday program to try and encourage kids to stay home, because we needed that was the time where people needed to stay home. And it really shows the beauty of a small place where, you can borrow a cup of sugar next door, you can actually know your neighbors, but also in tough times, everyone just comes together. And it wasn't about woe is me or look at the struggles that we've got, but more about, this is something that we're facing, but let's rise to it together.
Well, that's exactly what you get out of it. And, as well, like we're all connected by the internet, but you don't stop to think, well, I don't know, everyone threatens to drop their Facebook or their internet every once in a while and go completely off the grid and Luddite. What you can see in your video as well is that since it's not really an option, then you're going with, oh, this might even be a better option. Actually, real people in the same place connected by something that you can actually touch. So I think that was brilliant. I also really like that it's in an era of, and I love technology and everything, but in an era where we're used to seeing, especially people of your age group and younger, be so dependent on the technology that this video was pretty old school in many ways. I mean, you're using a drone and that's kind of new and you can do video editing but at the same time, there's not this serious perfection. For instance, everyone is singing like people. They're not singing like, I know these are uplifting where you see like 40 heads in the squares and they've been auto-tuned and they're all like, we are everybody together. And it's like, that's great. But it sounds like a bunch of goddamn computers, like all sort of tuned together. And it even makes me think that they feel more distant somehow for being in their own little square and different lighting, like the way that we are, where you're in a cool library and I'm in quarantine with lots of mirrors. Right on. Well, let's hear from the peanut gallery then. Kind of mix it up and take some voicemail questions and change conversation. This is
Hi, Ben, and whoever else is on the show today. My name is Larry. In the first few months of the pandemic, I really had no motivation to do anything creative for my own personal enjoyment. I had some freelance work and I eventually did find full-time work again. And I was obviously doing some creative work for that. I'm a videographer and video editor, so my work is naturally creative. But I didn't really do a lot myself until many, many, many months later. And I ended up consuming a lot, actually. Watching a lot of movies, playing a lot of games, reading a lot of books, discovering new content creators online. And I was curious how you felt about the balance between creation and consumption.
Great question, Larry. Good thing to think about. I mean, okay, well, first, I think that we do need, in order to have any kind of output, you got to have some input. But that doesn't mean that the input is exactly even the same discipline or the same idea as the output. For instance, you can take inspiration and poetry from nature or from architecture, from history, or from someone's story that they told you. So I don't feel personally the need to consume music in order to go out and make music all the time. And I do know musicians who are, I know one guy, go unnamed, because he's kind of famous, who on a road trip wanted to just listen to his music. There was a van full of people wanting to play stuff, like a playlist of stuff. And he was just like, nah, let's listen to this, and puts in his CD. But look, that may be inspiration for him. It's a little bit like drinking your own piss, I guess, in order to survive in the woods. I don't know. What you consume doesn't have to, resemble what you create. Although, Larry, your job is creative in itself. Some of the most creative things you may do may be in other walks of life that aren't even in your job. And I think that those things are good to pay attention to. So great thing to think about, Larry. I think there are a lot of angles to that. That's the first thing that I shit out. And thanks, and hope to see you out there. I just wrote a book, and it's my memoir. And I dedicated a whole chapter to all my great music teachers, like one by one. I just listed them and exactly what they did, because it began to occur to me as a grown-ass man who has been, making a living at music, that I didn't do it all by myself. And I see the different methods that they all had. And I go out and do a lot of batting for arts education, for instance, and there are a lot of arguments against the way that I argue. which is I went to a school where we sat on the floor. So from up till fourth grade, we didn't sit in desks, we sat on the floor. And for whatever reason, my teacher seemed to be musical. So as soon as we sat down on the floor, we'd start doing clapping and singing exercises. That's just fun. It would last for 10 minutes, and then we'd go into our lesson. It wasn't called anything, and it didn't cost anything. And when you go to bat for the ideas that don't cost anything, of course, those who are trying to get more money, which is understandable, we need to pay the teachers and we need the buildings, but they get upset with you. But I really think the conversation ought to be had about the stuff that you can do. Music how much does it cost to sing and clap? Can I ask you what kind of music program then you have out there as far as can the kids get their hands on musical equipment and sort of what the vibe is there strictly in the music department?
So we are lucky that last year we actually had a specialist music teacher who was working on instruments and working in the music room with the secondary students. Like you, I had an amazing, amazing music teacher, and I actually had her all the way through my primary school. And she led me in my first musicals. I got up on stage because of her. I learned how to play from the recorder to the xylophone and percussion instruments and everything. And it was only as an adult that I realized how lucky I had been.
Right.
I started to compare my experience to other people and realized how lucky I was. Intrinsically, as a teacher, it has then become a part of everything that I do. So songwriting is a massive tool that I use to build connection and relationships.
Amazing.
And support identity and allow students a voice. So I was even reflecting yesterday and going through different things I've done in my career. And at each of those poignant moments, I've written a song with a group of students. And I was just going over some of the words that those kids, and I see myself very much as a facilitator, as a leader in the classroom. I'm there to support students to find their own creative outlets. I'm really big about no shame, about there's no mistakes. It's about us working together to find our own sort of thing. And then on top of that, I guess, as you said, music to me it's a tool to calm. So when we come into the classroom, if things are a bit crazy, rather than raising your voice or making a loud noise, it might be a clapping game or a really quiet game that I start and then build up and we crescendo. It might just be simply putting on a piece of classical music that just brings the kids down. The connections to mindfulness and all of the research that we see around music and the brain and mindfulness in the brain has such a strong correlation. But then it's fun. Music is fun. Whenever I have to lead a group from one place to another to transition from a classroom, we're singing a moose song and we're doing actions or we're dancing along the way. And I think one of the things is that the kids see me have fun. The kids see that I'm not ashamed to stand up in front of their parents and sing and be silly. And their parents then go off that, and so their parents and other staff get involved, and so it's about leading by example, I suppose, and taking people into that fun, but also just allowing kids to be kids. There's so many things in this world. You've mentioned technology. In communities like ours, there's really tough things that our kids face. The kids that are growing up today are growing up in a world that I can't even comprehend, and that's not that long ago. We were just talking about when I was in primary school.
From my experience, growing up in the South in the USA, there were all kinds of twisted ideas about what was wrong with a boy who would be so effeminate to open their mouth and sing. It was bad. So there was a lot of shame around singing. There was certain kinds of singing that maybe was okay, but in general, just the standing. I mean, Ireland, as I understand it, if you're in a bar, some old pubs in Ireland, and you stand up and you start singing, people shut up and listen. So there can be a manly man singing a song about his day. But in so much of the world, I'm not dead sure, at least in my part of the world, it was. So when you mentioned shame, that strikes me as a really great gift to give these kids to get used to singing at an early age, to see you doing it and to see that it's okay and it's good. Were you singing at a young age? Was that encouraged?
Definitely. And I think my dad's experience was that he tells a story, as I've heard so many people since moving into education, telling a story about trying out for the school choir and not being good enough and being pushed to the side, or trying to play that musical instrument and then someone telling them, oh, you just don't have this, you're never going to be able to do that. And I think that so many people have experiences in their life where they kind of put themselves out there in terms of music and we're told you can't sing or you can't do this. And I'll be, out with friends and someone will say to me, really, do you think you could help me to sing better? Absolutely. Of course I could. Yeah. And I still do. I sit down. I find myself in some very strange situations, sitting down with people and running them through vocal exercises and different things to build up their confidence and to get them to start to hear and to listen. You have the power to do anything that you want to do, and we're all different. So the way you sing isn't going to be the way that I sing, but we can help you find your voice. I remember I had a singing teacher who wanted me to do all of the operatic scales, and all of a sudden I didn't like music. I was 14 and I went, oh, no, I don't like singing. I hate it. And my mum was wise enough to go, oh, something's not right here. And then I found a teacher who was just extraordinary, and she led the a cappella group. And so I started singing with her, and her whole thing was around, we're going to find your voice. It's not about trying to put you into a box or make you something. We're going to help you find your voice. And she certainly did that.
Over the last 20 years, too, again, I'm not trying to dump on computers. They do great things, but tuning really bothers me.
Yeah.
And my sound man once pointed out on tour, and I guess maybe everyone knows this, and it didn't occur to me, but the records of the 60s is all not quite in tune for a variety of reasons. Then the pitch tolerance is wider. So if you listen to Janis Joplin or, I don't know, Jimi Hendrix or a 60s singer, you'll hear they're not dead in tune, but that wasn't required because we hadn't set this bed. And now it's kind of like you feel like you have to have a web page and a stylist and all this, clicks and likes and stuff in order to be a legitimate singer, when I've always contended that when someone opens their mouth, they're a singer. The only failure is the failure to just be yourself.
So many beautiful, amazing singers may be what we deem as slightly off key, but the way they bend it back around and bring it into their tone, like that's what makes things really special. Things don't have to be perfect. With social media, and you look at Instagram, and as I mentioned, the world that kids are growing up in, everything is this idea of perfection and what things should look like, and it's become the same thing with sound. So I think the more that we can inspire and support kids to have those funny mistakes when they're learning to play an instrument, to have that sound that they've got to work out. The world would be pretty boring if we were a cut copy model of everyone else.
Miles Davis, at least, is attributed with some sort of quote that I think it goes, 1 time is a mistake and 3 times is jazz. Doubling down on what you just did, if it's you and you go, ooh, yeah. Hey, that's a song. I've got a motif going.
Yeah.
Right? Would you give us I didn't tell you this beforehand, and I haven't gotten this together yet, but I want to do every guest that I have on, I like them to give us all what you would, if you were the boss of us, what your exercise, or I'm going to call it like new week's resolutions. So this week we resolve towards being better creators, or being artists, or being creative. We are all going to read 2 lines of poetry, or write something in the morning, or listen to music. What would your assignment, Ms. Donnelly, be for us for this week?
I think that my assignment, and obviously my initial thought goes to kids and what I would like adults to do with kids, but then also I think it is as important for adults to do to each other. But if we're going to be creative, I think that the number one thing is to listen. And it's to listen to what people say, to think and listen deeply, so to actually understand what people are saying. Listen to the sounds of the trees as you're walking past. Listen to the sound of footsteps if you're in the city. Listen to the sound of the dogs barking in the distance and whether they're happy or sad and how that makes you feel, whether you feel scared or you feel like you want to go and see where they are. So to listen to each other and to listen to the place around you, because I think that when we're being creative, that inspires so much and connects to so much of ourselves, and it's something that we can draw on. So that would be my challenge for the week.
Did you have music therapy classes? Was music therapy a part of your awareness? And you mentioned music in the brain, so neurology and music. Are these things that you were interested in, or has this been more of a byproduct of your teaching?
Probably a bit of both. So when I was studying at university, we had to do a project, and what I became really interested in for sort of one of my final projects was looking into trauma-informed approaches to education. And the more that I looked into trauma-informed approaches, and it was because of some students that I was working with at the time, the more I looked into approaches, the more, I guess, correlations I saw with music. And every time I would sort of read something from my own experience, that's where it linked in so easily. And it just seemed to me like this is the tool that we need to be using to support kids in this area and developing their brains and all of these kind of things. So I ran a bit of a project, and I was lucky enough to be volunteering and working at a school. And the principal, who is a very close mentor, I caught up with her yesterday, someone who I attribute to learning a lot just by watching and listening. And she trusted me enough. She obviously saw something in me and allowed me to run this music program once a week. And the whole concept around the music program was to do with trauma-informed approaches and, some of the ideas of music therapy. I certainly hadn't trained, but I was interested and I was looking and learning. I have to admit that the program probably started with the students going, no way, not interested, don't want to be a part of this, you can take this somewhere else. But within an hour, they didn't want to go home, and it was 3:00 and I'm ushering them out of the classroom and asking them to leave. And I saw these students really transform in terms of how they interacted with me, how they interacted with each other. So there was a focus on different concepts of music, using different things like classical music for mindfulness things, all of these different sort of techniques, and exposure as well. So drawing first on what kids like. So I've become an expert at rap. I can beatbox. I can do all these things because I make it my business to find out what they like and to learn everything I can about it. But then from there, it's once you build that relationship with them, then I'm going to show you the rest of the world, and I'm going to play you jazz, and I'm going to play you classical music, and we're going to unpack it, and you're allowed to not like it, but you have to have a reason why you don't like it. And once you start to challenge kids on that, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, actually, I don't really mind the beat. The beat's kind of cool. Like if we took the beat out there and we added it to a hip hop track, I might like it.
Oh, cool.
So challenging them and having those conversations the whole way through, we were collecting ideas to write a school song. And so they wrote this rap. And we went into the local recording studio and the local radio station, played our rap. And it was young, black, and deadly. And, one of the lines was, like the chorus is, we represent Jarjum, which is kids and their school in language. This is our crew, Koori kids on the block, gonna make a stand. So it was all this whole language around who they were, what their identity was, what they believed in. One of the lines was about, we like to go to the bakery and have a pie and chocolate milk. It was still kids singing about being kids. But it was this identity, and that then became something that the school was really proud of. And for years after that, they used it as like this school anthem. So that was kind of where I started playing with this idea of music therapy techniques, I guess. Probably where I'm heading with my career as I move forwards. It's doing more research in that area and seeing what I can sort of do and share.
Yeah, what I've noticed about music therapy as a growing science and art form, it's still, the dots aren't necessarily that connected between the different schools of teaching, the organizations, because it's still growing and new. There's a lot, and what I hear from a lot of music therapists is the importance to just keep connecting with other music therapists around the world with what they've learned and gained, because there isn't like one dump for all that stuff. And it strikes me that you are like arriving at a lot of places organically that I have heard come from a lot of music therapists back in the States who all have massive networks. So you're really going at the speed of light here, what you're doing. And the writing of the songs, I've done that with kids some. I sat in as at my kids' school as a substitute teacher to teach their music for 2 days, and they ate me alive. I suck at it. Certainly it's hard to keep not just their attention, but so like what I noticed is I had 2 kids who were like superstars at music, and the rest of them increasingly cared less as those 2 sucked all the oxygen out of the room. How do you find that, like a classroom, especially with young kids, where people's idea seems to be that some kids are talented and some kids are not?
Any teacher, as a teacher, you look at a classroom, and whether you have 10 kids or 30 kids or 40 kids in front of you, New South Wales Department of Education, we talk about every student being known, valued and cared for. Mm-hmm. So we have this really big emphasis on knowing that child, and whether it's interest-based or their levels or their needs as a student. Teaching a music class to me is the same as teaching a maths class. Mm. You know, as a student, I did not like maths. That's not the way my brain worked. And I had this real block up. And I remember a teacher, I just said, I can't do it. And she said to me, she was my year 3 teacher, another very important person in my life. And she said to me, we're going to stop using that language. We're not going to say I can't, because if you keep saying I can't, then you'll never be able to. And it really changed things and turned things around. And all of a sudden in year 7, I was loving maths, and I found something clicked, and I was able to move down that way. With anything, there's people who are more talented, not as talented, who like it more, who have this predisposition to it, or who don't. Yeah. But what we have to do as teachers is kind of see it as our job is to find out and to support kids to find the things that they're good at, but also have experiences and learning for things that they might not be good at, because you still get so much out of that experience.
As I get older, I have more and more of a problem with the idea that some people are more talented than others. And I think it's from experience, because what I start to realize is that the skills that Bob Dylan had to bring to a record were very different than the skills that Pavarotti had to bring to a record. And as far as I know, Pavarotti's lyrics weren't very good. So it's like he didn't even try. That wasn't his thing. But musically, Bob Dylan had a knack for telling the story with his voice, with his inflection. The time is interesting. The sense of pitch is good enough. And all those things make him more relatable. So now when I think of someone having more talent than the other, I wonder what that talent is for. Because I think that it should just be about telling the story of life and expressing where you are and how you feel at that moment. And if you can find a way to do it creatively, maybe you don't need to have perfect pitch. Because with the kids, it's tougher because you do one thing. And it's like, so in music class, we'd say, okay, play this scale on the recorder. Well, I could do it. Hey, I'm talented. The kid next to me couldn't, but maybe they end up being a brilliant musician in another way.
So then you might have your tools up your sleeve where that kid who did it really quickly, rather than him getting to, or her, sit there and be like, I'm really good, I've nailed this, and I'm now going to be really annoying while everyone else tries to figure it out.
That's me.
You've got 5 cards to hit him with. Okay, cool, you got that. Now you're going to go over to the corner and you're going to do this one. And then by the 3rd one, it's really complicated. And he's going, ooh, how do I figure this one out? And so in that time, everyone else has been able to get that little bit going on, and then slowly you can keep feeding. But I think also what you're talking about talent is really important. And it's also, we bring to any art form our own experiences and preconceived notions of what makes something good or what makes something interesting. And so what someone perceives as talent might be very different to what another perceives as talent. And I think that's really important when you're working with kids, is opening them up to that idea that there's not just one rule, there's not one person is the right way or the good way, or however you want to express it.
Is that something you came up on yourself, or had you been taught somewhere a technique of writing songs with kids?
I was lucky enough to go to Central Australia, to Uluru, on a trip with some year 6 girls, so 11-year-old girls. I think there was about 15 girls and some teachers. And I was still training at the time, but I volunteered and said, I'd love to pay my way and come on this school trip if I could. We went, and we were lucky enough to stay with an Aboriginal community. So we were camping. We had about a week in Central Australia and moving around, and this amazing tour guide who introduced us to elders and community members, and we got to sit on country. And we took a guitar with us because I'd been doing some music with the kids, and I'd been working on some different things, doing some singing. We'd done a performance. The year 6 students had done a performance a few weeks before. So one of the teachers kindly put a guitar into the bus, and I couldn't play guitar. But while we were on this trip, there was a few moments where I got to sneak off and just go on this walk that this elder had taken me on, past ancient birthing caves, ancient artworks, this incredibly powerful magnetic place in the middle of Central Australia. And I sat at this waterhole, and I had this guitar with me, and I sort of started playing and awkwardly strumming some things along. And I'd played in a band. The boys had tried to teach me and then gone, no, you're unteachable. There's no way we're doing this. And I managed to pull together 3 chord-like things. I wasn't really sure what they were, but they made a sound that was kind of all right. And I just started humming this tune, and this thing sort of just stayed within me, and I couldn't get rid of it. And later we were sitting around the campfire, and the girls were bored. We needed to entertain them with something. And my go-to, if there's a dull moment or a gap in time, is I use music, and whatever that looks like. And so I said, we could write a song together. I came up with these 3 chords. What do you think? It was 4 chords because I played a G twice. And we sat around the campfire and I just played these 4 chords repetitively over and over and over again. And we came up with this song. And I was actually, again, I was looking at the lyrics. It was, feel the red dust fall between your fingers, the heat of the sun on your face. Let the wind run shivers through the valley, and all at once I feel true in this place. And this song then told the story of this journey that we had been on, and the way that it bound not only the kids together and with me and with the other staff. And it was just from sitting there and saying, okay, yep, that was a good line. What's the next one? And showing them that things didn't always have to rhyme. Things didn't have to always fit into preconceived notions of what a line or a lyric should be, but that we could play around with where we breathed or how we sang it or what melody we took.
You know, it's funny. I had this one group of kids who did it similar to what you're saying, which was, there were so many of them that we broke them off into groups. And I was really concerned that they were all, like, I'm not a teacher. And I kept on thinking, well, they all need to be involved. They all need to be involved. And sometimes there'd be a kid that just wasn't adding anything. But I realized there's this one kid, his name was Sam, and he kept on pulling on my sleeve and coming over and telling me who had gotten a chance and who had not gotten a chance and what they'd done. And I was like, well, that's his involvement. He's like going to be their lawyer. And that works too. At least the process of making a song it involves a lawyer, because that's what this kid was. He goes, it's really not fair. You haven't let Lucretia sing once. I was like, sorry, Sam.
We don't always have to be involved in things in the way that the teacher stands up the front or the facilitator stands up the front and thinks, this is the way this is all going to go and this is going to be your roles. But kids, if they actually have that opportunity to find their own role and what that looks like within that broader experience, it's pretty exciting.
I think my argument for the reason for doing this podcast and launching this is just about creativity. That's really what it's about. And my main interest is, kids realizing their creativity early, and not necessarily so that they can go into the arts. Probably they don't go into the arts. Probably they go into something else. And when they go into something else and they can make a public speech, or they can put a website together, or they can build a house or cut hair, it may well be because they realize the value of creativity at a young age. And in that way, I think, that makes people who do what you're doing and doing it so well as absolutely imperative to me for the world to get to click into gear is going to require some creativity, and I think what you're doing is really awesome. So if you have anything else that you wanted to say, get out there, talk about, I'm all ears, and we can edit it in any way. Is there something we haven't hit on, which is of mission?
Just linking to what you've said there, thinking about creativity. So the reason why I feel so privileged that my job every day, I get to go and I get to be creative and I get to facilitate these kind of things. So I just think how lucky I am. But you look at something like this year and 2020, what we faced, and the way that people had to be creative and think outside the box. And through challenge, people rise with these amazing things. So the world we live in, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration is something that I think music education, drama, the arts, it just encourages all of these experiences for kids. So I have to say that although, the focus has been on music with the ARIA nomination and all of that sort of focus, I'm someone who uses drama in my classroom every single day, and I explore literature through drama. I'm someone who paints, and I don't tell kids that they have to paint in a certain way, but we just explore, and we're creative. We dance, and we dance to interpret other people's messages, but we dance to share our own messages. And I think that it is so important for educators to have the experiences that they can draw on to then embed that across the curriculum, because the arts gives you an entry point for any learning, whether it's history. I use music to explore political movements. I use music to explore history that's happened here in Australia. It's From Little Things, Big Things Grow is a song that I've used from kindergarten up until high school students, telling the story of what's happened in our country. And so I think that sometimes in conversations around our curriculum and crowdings of curriculum, what's so important is to remember that the arts really is the grounding point, I think, and what should be sitting underneath everything, whether it's English, maths, science, geography. So I think that, it's so important to allow students such a wide range of experiences, because they can then take that into whatever they do and whoever they choose to be.
All right. Well, good luck with everything. If you need an American piano player for any kind of crazy reason, let me know.
Absolutely.
I to help.
Definitely will.
Stand up and be counted. Stand up, be brave enough to make mistakes. I'll be right there behind you. Dust off that shame and you'll find your place. Shake off that shame and you'll find your place. Oh, we'll take off that shame and you'll find your place.
Hi, if you're enjoying listening to Lightning Bugs, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot.